Dust lifted off the hard ground that morning. Slow, thick, reluctant to fall. People had come early. Boots scraped against packed earth. Voices stayed low. Eyes wandered but kept returning to the same place. Auctions always drew a crowd. This one carried a different weight. You could see it in the way men stood. Hats tugged lower than usual, glances cutting sideways, then away. She was there beside the fence, hands wrapped tight around the rope, knuckles pale. The cow at her side was small, soft-eyed, its coat brushed until it shone, like someone had dressed it for a funeral or a farewell. It was the last thing she owned. The whole town knew it. Nobody spoke it aloud, but they knew. Years had ground her down to bone. The soil went barren. Rains came wrong, too late, too savage, or not at all. The man who once stood with her existed now only as silence between her breaths. What she had left amounted to a scrap of land, a child who saw too much, and this single cow that had carried them further than reason allowed. The girl pressed into her mother's dress, peering out at the gathered men with eyes too wide for her age. She said nothing, but her small fingers clutched tighter each time a stranger moved near. She understood loss already. She knew what it tasted like when something that kept you alive was about to walk away. Across the yard, men appraised the animal with cold, efficient stares. Some muttered figures, others shook their heads and spat. For them it was commerce. Buy cheap, profit later. For her, it was the final page turning on everything she had been. Then he came forward. No hurry in his step. His boots fell deliberate and even, as though time answered to him and not the other way around. Dust lined his coat at the seams. His hat threw shadow across half his face. A cowboy. Nothing more, nothing less. But something in his bearing made the crowd go still without knowing why. He looked at the cow first, not her. His eyes traced the animal slow, reading it the way a man reads land, not for price, but for truth. Then his gaze rose, found hers. Brief, a single breath's worth of contact, enough to make her grip the rope until her hands ached. Bidding opened. Numbers came in low, cautious, feeling out the floor. She stood motionless as each offer floated past. None of them landed right. Every figure sounded like her life being weighed and found cheap. The cowboy held his silence. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some figured he had no interest. Others reckoned he was biding his time, patient as a predator. The little girl shifted her gaze to him, fixed there, unblinking, as though she recognized something hidden from everyone else. The bidding thinned. The auctioneer drew breath to close. Then his voice came through, calm, certain, pitched above every number that had come before. Heads swung toward him. The figure he named killed the whispers dead. It was more than the cow warranted. More than any man with sense would offer on a day like this. The auctioneer did not hesitate. The hammer fell sharp, a crack that rang across the packed dirt like a pistol shot. Done. A few men nodded, grudging respect in their eyes. Others narrowed theirs, trying to work out why a man would overpay for an animal worth half that sum. The cowboy offered no explanation. He stepped forward, drew folded bills from inside his coat, counted them out steady and sure. She watched his hands, watched his face. Relief should have flooded in first. It didn't. Something in his manner unsettled her. There was weight behind this purchase that had nothing to do with livestock. He passed the money over, reached for the rope. For one breath, she held on. Their fingers touched. Their eyes met again. This time, he did not break the look. Then, instead of leading the cow away as any buyer would, he did something that froze every soul in that yard silent. He laid the rope back into her hands, gentle, deliberate. Before a single person could piece together what they had witnessed, he spoke once more. His voice was steady, but beneath it ran something deeper, something no word in that crowd could name. That was the moment the world shifted under her feet, though no one standing there yet understood how far. The yard held a silence that did not belong to auction grounds. Even the auctioneer forgot his tongue. The rope sat in her palms again, rough fibre pressing familiar grooves into her skin as though it had never left. She searched his face, waiting for reason to follow action. He let the silence hold a moment longer. He said, low, clear enough for those nearest to catch every word. A murmur rippled through the gathered bodies, low at first, then swelling as folks turned toward each other with questions on their lips. Some shook their heads slow, others lifted their brows, uncertain they'd heard the man correctly. Gestures like that didn't come natural in a place where every coin was bled for. She swallowed hard, knuckles white on the rope. Her voice held steady on the surface. Underneath, though, a fracture only someone standing close would catch. His eyes never moved. He said. The answer settled nothing. It cracked the ground open wider, spilling more questions than it buried. Her gaze went to the money in the auctioneer's fist. Then back to the man before her. Nobody parted with that kind of money without purpose. Not here. Not anywhere on earth. The little girl shifted forward half a step, small fingers still bunched in the dress fabric. She studied the cowboy with something between wonder and wariness, trying to sort whether he belonged to the good or the dangerous. Children read truth in places where grown folks had long gone blind. "Ma," she whispered, voice too small to carry past the two of them. "Why is he doing that?" No answer came, not right away. Because there wasn't one to give. The crowd thinned, though not with any haste. People lingered near tables, pretending interest in other goods, while their ears stayed angled toward the strange thing unfolding. A few men studied the cowboy with longer looks now, measuring him differently. Kindness that large could be read as weakness in country where survival ruled everything else. He reached into his pocket again, slower this time. What he produced was nothing but a creased scrap of paper. He looked at it one breath's length, then folded it back and tucked it away. Small thing, almost nothing, but something about it tightened her chest. "You're from around here?" she asked, needing anything solid beneath her feet in a moment that offered no ground at all. He shook his head once. "Passing through?" That made even less sense. A man just passing through didn't spend money he'd never see again. A man just passing through didn't stop to shoulder problems that weren't his. "Then you should have kept your money," she said, sharper now. Not anger, confusion she couldn't disguise any longer. A faint smile touched his mouth, never reaching his eyes. The words hit harder than he likely intended. She straightened, spine pulling taut, pride rising fast to meet whatever pity might be hiding there. She had carried her own weight, done what needed doing without outstretched hands. She said. He replied. That answer should have angered her more than it did. Instead, it left silence in its wake, a silence she couldn't fill. No arrogance lived in his tone, only a quiet certainty that made arguing feel pointless. The little girl's eyes moved between them, face to face, reading something adults couldn't name. "Are you staying?" she asked, sudden and plain. Simple words carrying weight far beyond their size. The cowboy hesitated. Just a breath's span. First time he'd looked uncertain about anything. I wasn't planning to, he admitted. Wind shifted across the yard, dragging dust and dry grass scent with it. Somewhere distant, a door groaned on its hinges. A horse stamped heavy against packed earth. Life kept moving around them, but right there, everything hung still. She adjusted her grip on the rope. The cow shifted beside her, calm through all of it. Then why does it feel like you're not telling the whole truth? She asked, quieter now, more direct than before. He met her eyes again, and this time something different lived in his expression. Something heavier. Because the truth was, he had not arrived in that dusty yard by accident, and whatever had drawn him here was not yet finished. He didn't answer her question right away. That silence spoke louder than words ever could. It stretched between them, thick and uneasy, like air pulling tight before a storm breaks. Around them, the last stragglers drifted from the yard, though a handful still leaned against the fence, watching with quiet, careful interest. He said finally, voice dropped low, meant for her alone. She frowned, and the worry lines cut deeper across her face. His gaze drifted past her toward the open country beyond the yard. Fields that once held green now wore the flat, exhausted color of drought and neglect. Land that remembered better days, same as the people clinging to it. He said. That answer didn't settle her. Nothing about this morning had unfolded the way she'd planned, and now this stranger spoke in fragments, like a man carrying knowledge he hadn't earned the right to hold. She shifted without thinking, placed herself just barely in front of the child. We don't have trouble here, she said, but her voice betrayed her, thin where she needed it strong. Something crossed his face, not quite doubt, not quite sympathy, something in between. Trouble doesn't always announce itself, he said. Sometimes it just waits until folks are too ground down to stand against it. The words landed harder than she wanted them to. These past years had stripped more than livestock and harvest. They'd taken backbone, taken faith, taken the will to push forward without asking why. She'd carried that heaviness every single day. Before she could answer, a man stepped forward from the yard's edge. Older, broad through the shoulders, a face built more for command than compassion. He'd been watching for some time now. Quite a performance, the man said. His tone sat flat on the surface, but something sharp lived underneath. His eyes traveled from the cowboy to the rope still wrapped in her hand. Didn't realize we were giving things away today. The cowboy turned part way, posture easy but aware. Wasn't giving, he said, just keeping a fair deal honest. The man let out a dry sound, almost a laugh, but humor had no part in it. Fair shifts its meaning depending on the mouth it comes from. She knew that tone, knew it like weather. The voice of a man accustomed to compliance, especially from those who had no room to refuse. Her fingers tightened on the rope. We had an arrangement, she said, squaring herself toward the older man. The cow went to auction. That's exactly what happened. He looked at her, then at the cowboy. And yet here she stands, animal still in hand. Doesn't look like any sale I've seen. A few more people slowed their pace nearby, drawn back by the tension thickening in the air. The little girl pressed close again, small fingers twisting into the fabric at her side. The cowboy stepped forward, just enough to place himself between them, just enough to alter the geometry. Money changed hands, he said. That settles it. Maybe in your estimation, the man replied, but here we keep things clean. Ownership shifts when the deal closes. No reversals. Your rule? The cowboy asked. It's how order holds. There it was. Not law, not fairness. Control. She felt it seat itself in her chest. that old, familiar sensation of walls closing in around something bigger than her. The auction had been her last resort, not her preference, and even that now seemed to be twisting into something else entirely. "You already took your share," she said, voice carrying more steel now. "There's nothing left to claim." The man's eyes thinned. Quote, _41, _. He didn't finish. Didn't need to. The cowboy's expression shifted, a subtle hardening, just enough to read. "Sounds like you're inviting trouble." The man held his stare. "No, I'm telling you it's already arrived." Wind swept the yard again, dragging dust across the ground between them. The whole space seemed to hold its breath, waiting to learn which direction this would fall. She looked from one man to the other, the moment's gravity pressing against her ribs. This wasn't about a cow anymore. It was something rooted deeper, tangled in the land, in the people, in whatever quiet war had been building long before today. And somehow she stood at its center. The air compressed with each passing second, as though the earth itself sensed something about to fracture. Nobody moved. The few onlookers still present kept their distance now, watching in silence, as if stepping closer might drag them into something with no way out. She kept hold of the rope, though her hands had begun to shake. The cow shifted again, reading the unease, its placid nature dissolving. The little girl leaned into her side, eyes wide, not grasping what unfolded before her, but feeling its full weight regardless. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice holding steady even as dread climbed through her ribs. The older man didn't answer immediately. His gaze drifted past her, out across the land, surveying it the way a man surveys what he already owns, no deed required. Everyone just knew. When he finally spoke, his voice dropped lower, carried more weight. He said. He paused. Cold moved through her like groundwater. She'd heard the whispers, late nights when neighbors leaned close and spoke barely above breath. Families disappearing without warning. Farms standing hollow by spring. She'd told herself it was separate from her, that if she worked harder, kept her head down, she could hold. She said, he replied. That single word, now, hit harder than anything before it. This wasn't about today, it was about tomorrow, the day after, every morning that followed until she broke. A line that kept moving, one she'd never catch. The cowboy shifted his weight, his presence settling heavier. He said. The man gave him a long, measuring look. The cowboy answered. The tension between them drew taut, wire stretched past its limit. One wrong syllable and it would snap. She studied the cowboy's face again, searching for something solid. He'd stepped into this without pause, spoken when every other mouth stayed shut. But she still didn't know why. Men didn't risk things like this for strangers. She said, softer now, urgency threading each word. He didn't look away. Because I've seen what happens when no one does. Something lived in that answer, something worn smooth by years, real in a way that couldn't be faked, like it came from a wound he still carried. Her chest tightened, not from fear this time, from the weight of recognition. This moment was larger than her struggle alone. The little girl tugged gently at her sleeve. She whispered. She swallowed hard. Her eyes dropped to the child. Just a second, she said, though she had no idea how she'd keep that promise. The older man stepped forward now, closed the distance. You can't hold on forever, he said. Sooner or later, everything comes due. The cowboy moved, just enough to block his path. Not aggressive, but firm. Not today. The man stopped. His gaze shifted between them. You think one act like this changes anything? He asked. You think giving back a cow fixes what's already in motion? No, the cowboy said, but it's a start. The words hung there, simple, heavy with meaning. Wind picked up again, stronger now, dragging dust across the yard and into the open street beyond. Somewhere distant, a door slammed. A horse let out a sharp sound, restless, uneasy. More people had gathered, drawn back by the rising tension. They stood in small clusters, watching, waiting. No one spoke, but the silence pressed louder than any voice could. She felt it building, that pivot point where everything tips one direction or the other. Her heart hammered. Thoughts raced through every possible outcome, none of them clean. Then the older man drew a slow breath and reached inside his coat. The movement was small, but it changed everything. The cowboy's eyes narrowed. His stance tightened like a spring compressed. She felt the child press closer, fear now open and raw. Whatever came next would decide more than the fate of a single cow. It would decide who held power here, and who was willing to stand against it. As his hand disappeared inside that coat, the whole yard seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the moment that could not be undone. For 1 second, nobody moved.